Many of us have seen images similar to this one. The skinny, bony girl who looks in the mirror and sees herself as fat. We ask ourselves, why does she see herself like this? Why doesn't she see herself as she really is, the skinny girl severely underweight? I used to have similar questions to this one.
Then, in 2007, we began asking those very same questions of Katie when she was diagnosed with an eating disorder. Today, we'll be sharing with you not only the story of her recovery, but how we, as her family, supported her through this.
In 2007, I was diagnosed with anorexia shortly after my 16th birthday. I began treatment for this almost right away. The treatment was at first partial programs where I would go in for group therapy or individual therapy and eat meals there with the hope that I would eventually gain weight and leave and be better. At first, the treatment was new to me. It was a new experience, and I thought, well, after several months of doing this, I will get better. No problem. But I wasn't making those changes in my life to actually get to that point. Months turned into years, and there seemed to be no end in sight. But first, I want to show you a picture that I drew during those first few months to illustrate what it was like for me. So in this picture, you'll notice that the background is black, because I was struggling with depression at this time, and that made it very difficult to see any rays of sun in my life. Everything was interpreted through a black lens. But I have various lines of color on top of that, and that illustrates the many different emotions that I felt at the time. I was angry, upset, confused, frustrated. I didn't know where my life was going at this point, and that created a whole host of emotions for me. But I have a white dot in the middle, and that white dot to me symbolized hope, because eventually, if I could just hold on to that hope, maybe I would get better. But eventually, everything turned black as I grew numb to the world around me.
This was a very dark time for me and my family as well, as we watched Katie struggle with this illness. The empty room in our home not only symbolized a missing family member, but also the emptiness in our hearts as we sadly watched her go through this tragic illness. We felt powerless to help her when we really didn't know what to do or where the end was. For me, as her younger sister, it was even harder. We had been best friends. I looked up to her in everything. She just seemed perfect. She had so many friends, and she excelled academically. But when she had anorexia, all that was taken away from her. For me, it's just so hard to understand why this is happening to my own sister. In this picture, you can see one of the times that she was on a pass, and it's just so hard for her to smile because of all the despair that she felt. For me, it was so hard because where she had been my best friend and we had spent so much time together, I was now only seeing her a few times a week and on these infrequent passes. One of the scariest times for me during these few years was when my parents called me one day and said that Katie was being hospitalized with a very dangerously low heart rate. It was in that moment that I realized that God could take away Katie at any time. I realized just how precious Katie's life was, how fragilely she held on to it. It was in this fear of losing Katie that I lived for several years.
Soon in 2007, I did begin to get better. In 2009. This was right around my 18th birthday. I had just spent several months in the hospital and I switched hospitals. That move was crucial for me. During those previous years, I wasn't in school, which took a lot away from me. But now, at this new hospital, I could go to school. And that opened up a future of possibilities for me. I could maybe eventually graduate high school. And then after high school, I could fulfill my dream of going to college and graduating from college. But first, the depression had to ease and I had to get better. And getting better meant I also had to mend relationships with my family and friends who I had pushed away during those previous years. And that would take some difficult changes for me. I want to share a quote with you that I wrote in my journal during those few months to illustrate what it was like for me at that time. So in this quote I say, "It's funny how much I want to get better, a new and welcome feeling for me. I just want to beat this eating disorder. It'll be a challenge, but I think I can do it. I held on to that I think I can because it gave me hope for the future. But I needed the support of my family and friends to get me through this. I needed people who would be in my life at that point who hadn't given up on me yet, because I had almost given up on myself. But I knew my family and friends were still there, and they were still holding out hope for me. There were many times when I would call my mom from the hospital just wanting to come home. And I don't remember what she said at that point, or if there was really much that she could say at that point, but I just needed to know that there were people back at home who wanted me to get back there too. And that kept me fighting and pushing forward, and eventually I did go home. I feel so fortunate to have the family that I do, because I met many girls and guys in treatment, and they didn't have family or friends supporting them. They were alone in their struggles, and I never had to deal with that despair. So eventually I was able to get to the point where I could come home and write in my journal several months later that I'm just enjoying so much what I'm doing right now, that why would I want to ever change? And I meant it, because I was finally able, because of the support of my family and friends, to write those words and say that my life is a whole lot better than it had been. And now I can stand before you today as a senior, about ready to graduate. I'm walking this spring, and I will leave Fitchburg State as a graduate and go on to graduate school. And I couldn't have done that without the support of my family and friends who never gave up on me.
I'll never forget the moment when Kay walked out of the hospital door, free to finally come home. It was like she was coming out of a prison. She was so happy. And in a sense, she was coming out of prison, out of being imprisoned by the lies and hurts that held her captive for too many years. Seeing her smile come back onto her face and the life come back into her eyes made everything worth it. All the awkward family meetings, or when we were trying to get her to eat, it was all worth it to see it all come back. She came home to a place of healing. It was new life for her. Now we can stand here today telling you the story of hope and healing and recovery, because we chose to persevere. Thank you.